Okay, listen up. I couldn't resist, Gilly. I couldn't resist.
And it works, so don't knock it.
Yes, it did.
Do not knock it when it works. You gotta get the tone a little better, but I'll keep it going.
Okay. Well, good evening. It is good to have you here back again. I hope you were as blessed as I was to hear what God is doing in Juneau, Alaska, and what God has done in our hearts, how He adopted us. He didn't force us, but He adopted us with full rights of children. What an amazing truth that is. Well, we are privileged to have Andrew and Hannah Aldifer back with us again tonight, and they're going to share a little bit more about some unique aspects of their ministry. And then I hope you have some questions, because we've got the roving mic. We're going to see how much time we have at the end to ask any questions you might have. How cold does it get, or I don't know, whatever. Although the discussion just a minute ago, maybe you can ask about what it takes to get a moose. So, yeah. So anyway, I want to pray and then give all the rest of the time over to them and see what God has for us tonight. Good evening, Father. What a beautiful day you've given to us. What an amazing God you are. We're so incredibly blessed to know you and to be here so we can worship you, and that's what this is about. So I pray again that your Spirit would move as only you can, that you would challenge us and encourage us. We pray that you would speak to the Aldifers and through them, that you would receive all the honor and glory tonight. We are so blessed to be in your presence. Would you speak as only you can, and we commit our time to you in the name of Jesus. Amen.
All right, so this morning was kind of, I would say, like a 30,000 foot view of camp as a whole, and so tonight we want to try and zoom in a little closer and just share more of the, day-to-day details and some of the unique aspects and culture and all of that, and yeah, just thinking about the culture of Alaska and how it's different than from here. We were actually talking on the drive over about a time we were visiting one of our supporting churches that is about 40 miles north of Haines, which is the next community north of Juneau, sits almost on the Canadian border. And what brought it up was Gilly said, we're really informal, very laid back. And that church is informal. The pastor was speaking and giving this illustration of, if some guy pulled up on his Harley with his road leathers on and, big beard and sleeve full of tattoos, and growing up in my context, I expected him to be like, we might be a little wary and, standoffish. But no, he's like, we would think that guy's cool and, invite him in and want to talk to him. But if some guy showed up in a suit and tie and sat down, we'd be a little, hesitant and concerned. And it's like, that is the complete opposite of what I grew up with. But yeah, very, very casual. The church we attend in Juneau, our pastor usually is wearing blue jeans and a flannel with a vest is his typical attire in the winter. So we appreciate laid back, casual, but just made me chuckle thinking, culturally, this would be very formal. But we have another slideshow. We've got some more pictures just about kind of the day-to-day, and then some at the end. I dabble in photography, so just some animals and scenery and stuff like that to share the physical side of life in Alaska. So can you go ahead to the first picture? So wanted to focus a little bit about the campers. So we have 4 age groups spanning 7 all the way to 18. So our youngest are 7 to 9, and then 10 and 11, 12 and 13, and then our senior high is 14 through 18. And so About 70% of them are from Juneau itself. And then that other remaining percentage is mostly represented in other communities in Southeast Alaska. So we get campers from Ketchikan, Petersburg, Wrangell, Hoona, Haines, Sitka, about 13 different communities. We get kids coming to us, and so they either fly in. Some of them can fly on Alaskan Airlines to Juneau. Some of them it's smaller prop planes, or they take the ferry, which for them coming from, say Petersburg or Ketchikan, even further south, they'll spend about 3 days on the ferry to get to Juneau on time to go to camp for a week and then spend 3 days ferrying back sometimes. That's just the way the ferry schedule works. But it's kind of just another part of life in Southeast. And all of these communities, with the exception of Haines and Skagway, your only transportation out of town is by boat or by plane. So a lot of our kids grow up feeling very trapped, very restricted, feeling like anywhere is better than here. And so most of them, when they graduate, they are gone. They're down south. They want out of Alaska. And then typically in their mid-20s, we'll see some of them start coming back, realizing, you know what, it wasn't as bad. Down south isn't as great as I thought. But that is definitely a struggle for kids growing up in these small villages of, the only people you see every day, and you can't just go to the next town for this event, or, you kind of are stuck with what you've got. Go to the next slide.
I was just going to point out that they're barefoot there, and it was probably like 50 degrees outside. Those kids will swim in anything, like raining and 50 degrees, and they're like, yeah, let's go swimming. It's like, are you kidding?
So our ocean front there, our ocean is classified by the Coast Guard as cold water, which means year-round we never average higher than 45 degrees. So, at low tide on that sandy spot, the, top couple feet will get warmed up above that, but we've got, they'll swim in anything. It doesn't really bother them at all. And the kids from like Sitka, which sits out on the Gulf, they come up and they're like, your water's warm, compared to what we've got. It's like, this is like a pool. I don't know if I quite see that, but it doesn't bother them. So next one, just more pictures of campers. They're sitting in front of our trading post, the camp store, so they can get merchandise, candy, soda, all sorts of, I think you can see the ones got stuffed animals, but that's a favorite every day is hit the camp store. Go ahead to the next one. So this is a view in our chapel. So our new chapel, this was completed in 2019, was the first summer we used it. Our former chapel was the upstairs of the original barn that the downstairs was used for livestock. The upstairs was a haymow, and then once camp started, they made that the chapel, but it was not ventilated, not insulated, so a tin roof on a hot, sunny day, that place was cooking, and then you put 100 campers and counselors, and it was tight, it was hot, and so this one we built that we can comfortably seat 200, and we could squeeze 300 if necessary. But we have a stage, so we actually have, room for a worship band and skits and things like that. So we meet for chapel twice a day, and we have speakers come in week to week that are kind of gifted at speaking to whatever the age group for that week is. Because let me tell you, not everybody can be a Colt Camp, 7 to 9-year-old speaker. That takes a gift to be able to contextualize the gospel for 7 to 9-year-olds and keep their attention for 20 minutes. I can't do that. That's not where my giftings lie. Anything about no, you can see it's a lot of wood. At camp we have 2 sawmills now, and we got permission from the city, because technically even though we're 40 miles north of town, we're still within city limits, and so all of our building has to be to city code, and they don't usually make exceptions for like self-cut lumber, but they gave us an exception, and everything wooden you see in that place we milled on site. I think I started with my dad in the winter of 2015 on the cut list for what we knew we were going to need when we started construction in 2017. So that alone was easily a $250,000 worth of savings, not having to buy lumber. So yeah, we love it. It's fun to just get out and do manual labor sometimes. Dad says that's his blood pressure medicine, is to go run the mill. Yeah, and this last fall we were actually gifted by a group of our work teams who come every year. They came together and basically just said, what would be a blessing for camp? And our construction manager said, well, I don't even know if it's possible, but a 4-sided planer to be able, when we cut all our own lumber, to run it through so we get the same consistent board on the outside, because we get a lot of volunteers coming to run the mills, and not all of them are super interested in checking with a tape measure that they're actually cutting. So, your 2x4 might be anywhere 2.25 and 4.5. So to be able to run everything through this 4-sided planer and have a consistent product coming out will be a huge blessing as we move forward with some building projects. But just another way that our work teams are immense blessings, because it's like one of those things that camp out of our operating budget would never be able to just like buy this, but some of those guys, they made contact with other teams and just said, hey, we want to do this. You can go to the next one. So part of our job as program with our summer staff is we do 2 weeks of orientation when the counselors first get there, that we are kind of training and walking them through everything that they need to know before campers arrive on site. So in this picture here, and you can go to the next one, this is like the first day we do like icebreaker exercises, and I said this is just, seconds before I conceded defeat. But that's a game called rock, paper, scissors, splits. And each time, whoever loses, a foot moves back each time. So it just gets wider and wider until suddenly, no, you can't go any further. But so we get to, through this process, that first one was like kind of a name game where they come up on either side, and when they drop the tarp, you have to say the other person's name first, and most of these people just met like 18 hours before, so names are still pretty fresh, and it's a lot of standing there staring and stammering trying to find the right name. But that 2 weeks of orientation are so crucial to the health and the unity of our summer staff. We've seen this time and again where counselors, whatever scheduling conflicts they may have, if they come late and they miss those weeks of orientation, because during that time, all of our full-time staff and then summer staff share their testimonies. if they miss those first 2 weeks, even if they just come the week after, never seem to fit quite as tight. And there's just something about the intimacy and the vulnerability of that time and sharing stories and hearing other people's testimony that just welds the team together like none other. So we've actually got to the point where if they can't stay the whole summer, it's like, well, you can leave early, but we won't let you come late. Just for our benefit and for their benefit as well, because I don't know, you won't feel as much of a part of the team if you miss those weeks of orientation. But just another, step in, like, growing our counselors. A lot of our counselors, when they show up, have never shared their testimony with anybody, or have never shared their full testimony, and been open and honest and vulnerable. And that right there is a huge step for a lot of them.
And as full-time staff, we go first. So all the full-time staff shares over a couple days their testimonies to kind of give that example of vulnerability of like, hey, this was how Jesus saved me, and here's my story. And I think it prompts the counselors and summer staff to be like, oh, we can be vulnerable, and it's okay to share these scary parts and the things I'm working through, and it's okay to bring people into that, which is scary. But it's cool to see them get that courage and to do that after we give that example.
Yep. But it's cool how many times, through that, later on during the summer, they may have a camper who, has struggles with something, or something has happened in their life that maybe they don't necessarily relate with personally, but they're like, hey, I know so-and-so's story, and I know that was part of their testimony. Let me connect you. And so, for the counselors to be able to take what for a lot of them is like the hardest part of their testimony, and then see how God can use that to directly impact the life of a camper is huge for them. To see that it's not a mistake or it wasn't wasted, to see that God doesn't make mistakes, is a really big deal for a lot of our summer staff. And our summer staff come from all over the country. So we have counselors from Alabama, Florida, Texas, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Missouri. We've had counselors from California, New Mexico, one from Colombia. That was cool. And Spain, a couple from Spain. So, honestly, it's kind of cool just to see where they all show up from. We do have some local ones as well. But our counselors come from all over, and part of that comes from, all of our full-time staff as we're traveling, speaking in churches and updating, or support raising, just putting the need out of, hey, we need young people, and if you know somebody, send them our way. And a lot of our counselors, if they come once, will come twice. So we get a lot of repeat counselors, pretty self-explanatory. Everybody puts on white t-shirts and we throw paint at each other. Go ahead to the next one. Haynes. And one more, so that's kind of the top view. There we go. So this is our dining hall. Haynes, we have a second campus. In 2015, the director at the time of what was Rainbow Glacier Camp, which is now Echo Ranch Haynes, called Dad at the end of the summer and said, hey, would you like another camp? And Dad said, no. He said, I can barely run one. What do I want with two? But it was under the Presbyterian denomination. The national denomination as a whole was liquidating assets, and they were worried, they recognized that their camp was in decline, and they were worried that it was going to be liquidated by the national conference, and they really wanted to see it continue being used for camping ministry. And so they gave everything to Echo Ranch, basically turnkey, their bank account, their vehicles, literally everything they just signed over. And it pretty much just sat the first summer as we tried to figure out what do we even do with another camp in Haines. And yeah, how do we get there? How do we get people and materials and all of that? And it became very obvious very early on that we needed a boat. So we had been sending everybody up on the ferry, which by the time you left camp till you got to the camp in Haines, you were looking at about an 8-hour time commitment, and $100 per person. So it's like, we really need a boat. And so in 2018, we were connected, referred through people that knew people that knew people, to a guy who would build us a boat. Essentially, it's just a kit, and he did all the welding and manufacturing himself. But we ended up with a 28-foot partial landing craft. So it's like a 3/4 hull is what they call it, that the end gate drops down, so we can easily pull onto the beach at camp, load it with materials, people, and then head to Haines. And if the water's flat, we can be from the Juneau camp to the Haines camp in an hour flat. So it has gone a long way to unifying those two places and not feeling like when you're in Haines you're on the edge of the wilderness, but knowing like, no, we can get back and forth quickly as need be. Again, if the water cooperates, it's about 40 miles of Lynn Canal that separates it, and sometimes it'll blow up, to 5-6 foot waves, and it's like, yeah, we're not going in this. But we can do it in three and under. It's just bumpy and not a super fun ride, but it's not unsafe. So the camp up there, this is kind of what we call lower camp. So all the cabins are up the hill behind the dining hall. But one thing that we recognized was that the kitchen setup that they had was not going to be functional if we wanted to scale up and start having larger groups. Everything was kind of just added on as needed. Nothing was built with intentionality or a vision of what do we want this property to be in 10 years. So that new construction that you see in the middle there is going to be the new kitchen, and essentially that whole red building, not the dining hall, but the whole building towards the back of it will all disappear because it's being incorporated into this new kitchen. So it'll be the kitchen, it'll be laundry facilities, it'll have walk-in fridge and freezer, which right now one of those rooms is just full of like 4 just upright refrigerators and 3 freezers. So walk-ins will go a long way to better storage, less room, and then it'll also have its own dining room for the staff on site, depending on what group is there. If they would like to do meals more separate, we would have that ability to just eat, as staff in the kitchen itself. So once that's done, all of that in the back will disappear, and those two they are joined now. It wasn't when this picture was taken. But this facility is going to be a lot more kind of retreat focused. So at our base camp, we have a spring and fall retreat season where we'll see almost as many retreaters as we see campers in a summer. Last year, I think we had like 850 retreaters through in about 6 weeks. And, for years we've had churches and youth groups asking like, hey, could we bring a group? And if it's in the 12 months that summer staff are on site, it's like, we just don't have space. And so this facility would give us that opportunity that if they do want to come, we do have a location. We have a place for them to come, and the view is just phenomenal. The one at Juneau is nice, but this one is better. And so we would really like to see it develop more as kind of a retreat center. We've talked about the possibility to have, cabins that are essentially just set aside for pastoral care, that anytime a pastor says, I'm tired and I need a getaway, they can come. We've got housing, basically no responsibilities whatsoever or expectations, but just come, renew yourself, and fill up. So that's kind of some of the vision that we would like to see that property be used for. We do day camps every year, and last year we had over 70 kids by the end of the week of day camps, which is over half of the elementary school for the age group represented. So there are about 300 kids total in the Haines school system. So for the elementary part, we had, over half the elementary students in Haines coming to day camp, which is really exciting because those first couple years when it switched from Rainbow Glacier to Echo Ranch, the community as a whole was very standoffish, very suspicious. And I think our first week of day camps, we maybe had 20 kids. And so we've been able to see over the last 5 years that number slowly continue to grow. And then this year they actually ended up postponing the Little League tournament because all the kids were going to be at camp and they weren't going to get back in time to start when they were supposed to. So they pushed it back an hour. So we've definitely got a lot more community buy-in, and they're happy to see that we do care about the property. We're going to keep it going, and they're very much more on board. Go ahead to the next one. So these are some youth. We were asked last summer. There were about 20 kids represented between two of the local churches in Haines, and the pastors are like, we don't really have anybody for youth leadership. We don't have, they were meeting, but Matt, the one pastor, said, my gifting is not in youth. So could you please help us out? So twice a month throughout the summer, some of our staff, we took turns going up, and we would just have youth nights at the camp where they could come out, and we'd roast marshmallows and hot dogs and play volleyball and just hang out and do whatever they wanted. So that was a big blessing for the local church, and the kids really enjoyed it. The night that we did this get-together was when the Alaska State Fair was happening in Haines, which is it's a pretty big deal. And we're like, man, I don't know if any kids are actually going to show up, but thankfully it was small enough. It started Thursday night, and this was Friday, and they had all seen, they were like, we saw everything there was to see, so we wanted to come out here. But we were like, man, this might be a quiet evening, but we had a dozen kids, so anything about Haines? Anything I'm missing? Haines is on the road system, which makes it a little unique. So you can drive, like I said, it's about 40 miles, 45 miles up to the Canadian border. And then from there, you can either go south or you can duck up through Canada to the rest of the main body of Alaska. So as a camp, it's the facilities are more rustic, but in a lot of ways they enjoy more amenities than we do at the Juneau camp. At the Juneau camp, we are off-grid. We generate all our own power. We've got our own wells. We're basically a town unto ourselves, and they have city power and water and sewage and all of that, where it's man, this would be great if we could be on city power. our number one our expense as a camp is fuel for the generators. We spend about $50,000 a year just to have power, and we have to truck it from town out to camp. So either my dad or one of our staff, Austin, our mechanic, he has his CDL as well. So we have a flatbed truck with 2 fuel tanks on it that they can haul, I think, 600 gallons of diesel at a time. That we have a 36-foot landing craft that you can just drive the whole truck onto, boat it the 2 miles around to the end of the road, and then drive into town, fill up, come back, and again boat it back into camp. And so we have to do that once a week just to keep everything topped off, and then at the end of the season they'll do probably about 4 trips in a week just to get everything completely full for the winter, so we don't have tanks sitting, half empty, pulling condensation. Go ahead to the next picture. Some of our free time activities. It's my dad's boat that we're on, but we can crab and shrimp right in front of camp, which is what we're doing there. So we spend a lot of time on a boat.
Some days it feels like all we do is deckhand, but it's fine. It's fun.
And then one more, I think it's a bigger picture. Yeah, so that's a medium-sized shrimp. So they're called spot prawns, that are, the big ones can be just about a foot from the end of their nose, I guess it is, to their tail. So it's a chunk of shrimp. But the kind of mantra for Alaska living is winter is coming. So all summer you're just kind of stocking up, whether it's picking berries or putting fish in the freezer, shrimping, crabbing, whatever it is, because you're going to have 9 months where there's nothing, no natural resources to harvest. So gotta prep for the lean years. Go ahead to the next one. Eggs.
Yeah, so a lady came out on a spring retreat last year, and she happened to be one of the managers at our local grocery store, Fred Meyer's, and she was talking to Randy, his dad, about how many eggs they had. So someone had accidentally ordered just like pallets and pallets of eggs at their store, and she's like, I don't know what we're gonna do with all these eggs. And so through talking with Randy, she was like, listen, if you come and buy, I don't even know how many she said.
I think we had to take they were supposed to order like one flat essentially, because it was for Easter.
That's right.
And somebody ordered an entire case, which was dozens upon dozens upon dozens. So she's like, if you take a whole, I think a flat, like we can get it
was going to be
you.
50 cents a dozen. So we were like, okay. So we went and we bought 9,000 eggs.
And I think she actually got it down to 25 cents a dozen.
And so we just cracked eggs for hours and just put them in. We did 3 dozen at a time, and we scrambled them and froze them in bags, and we used them all summer.
All summer long for breakfast casseroles, for French toast. We just the freezer was kind of a comical sight. Just packed. We'd put them flat so they'd freeze, and then you could just stack up these bags of eggs. But at the base camp, we used the very last bag the day that the counselors left to fly home. So that somebody's mistake in the spring supplied camp with eggs the entire season long. And I mean, that alone was a couple $1,000s worth of savings, because the amount of eggs that we go through it's a lot, and we still had to buy, to supplement through the summer of, times when the cooks needed just like 1 egg here, 2 egg, just whatever they were making. But yeah, it was a big blessing, but it was a wild couple hours of just,
It's one of those situations where you're like, how did I get here? Like,
how is this real
9,000
life?
eggs. We're just cracking them. It was fun though.
Yeah. Go to the next one. Fun things happen all the time. Like, you find out the septic tank that they put in the, like, 80s, I think, was not functioning the way it was supposed to and backing up. So your maintenance guys get to spend a week digging out, pumping out, and replacing the tank. Yep, go to the next one. These were our most recent projects. I was telling someone today about some of our more recent staff have families. One family has 5 kids, one has 3 kids, and a lot of staff housing was not set up for family units. And so we wanted a place where families could be families, that they could have a little more privacy and just, not have to worry about their kids being too loud or running or being up too early, whatever it may be. So in the last 3 years, we built these 2 single-family dwellings, and we're moving towards more individual housing for our full-time staff. A lot of our housing was built at a time when camp was only 6 weeks in the summer, and our 6 weeks total. The staff were on site for about 10 weeks. It's like you can put up with a lot for 10 weeks, but now that we're on site for 6 months, it's like we could have better housing arrangements than this. So we'd like to build, they're calling them staff cottages. So essentially like these, but scaled down for couples, or a couple with 1 kid, and then using what is now our staff housing for guest housing, because we're constantly bumping up against kind of the ceiling of how many beds do we have at camp. And so we've got a lot of people that want to come and serve, but it's like we just don't have room for you. We don't have anywhere for you to stay. Last July, I don't think we had an empty bed in camp. Like, everything was just full. So we want to be in a position where people say, hey, I'd like to come for 2 weeks and work in the kitchen. It's like, great, we've got a spot. The cooks would love to have you come and serve alongside. And hopefully we'll start putting the foundations for those in probably in September of this year, towards the end of our season. Go ahead to the next one. So I said about, we're 40 miles from town and then 2 miles around the beach from where the road ends. And when everything we do when it comes to transportation and logistics is dictated by the tide. So there we get, at peak, we get about 21 feet of tidal fluctuation. So in that first picture where the girls were standing on the beach, at high tide will be about 8 feet underwater. And that happens every 12 and a half hours. So yeah, anytime you want to go to town, you check the tide, see, well, am I driving out or am I boating out? And so with our 19 horses, oftentimes it's not sunny enough for a long enough stretch in the summer to make hay, and so we end up buying in hay, but we get it delivered to the end of the road. We have to unload the container, and then tractor and flat wagon and basically anything that can haul cubes of hay, we get loaded up there, drive the 2 miles around the beach, and then unload into the barn. And it's just another thing of, for us, it's just life, but it's like nothing's easy. It's like, man, if we just had a road that we could drive it straight to the barn and not have to handle everything twice, that would be ideal. But even in that, it continues to get better. The last 2 times we've done it, the hay has shown up in pallets, which has been a blessing when it comes to unloading. The first year we did it, all the hay showed up loose, like just bales stacked in. So every single bale got handled out, got loaded onto the wagon, around the cove, handed out, and then stacked. So every bale got handled 4 times, which is excessive. And so then they started saran wrapping, 9 bales to a cube, and now finally we've got it on pallets that we can just, hook on and skid out with the tractor. So it's better, it makes you look back and appreciate how it could be. And yeah, we're grateful that we have horses. Our horses are some of the only in Southeast Alaska, so they're definitely a very big draw for kids to come to camp and get to ride a horse. Go ahead to the next one. Shopping. This was our first grocery run of the season a few years ago. Yeah. We, in the summertime with camp, we have people that do this twice a week, and each time's roughly, it's between, I would say, $2,500 and $3,000. So we go through a lot of food, but camp is known for its food. Kids, they're like, man, I wish I could eat like this at home. And it's, basically all, I wouldn't say all you can eat, but we do seconds at every meal, and nobody goes home hungry. Go to the next one. And then, again, just in the way of the hay and everything else, all of our groceries, there was a clip in it in the video this morning, get trucked out to camp, and then assembly line, because the kitchen is on the 2nd story of the dining hall. Everything gets handed up the stairs into the pantry and then stacked. This was actually at the end of our season. Everything left over that's canned or dry that will last till the next year gets moved down to, we call it the greenhouse, our housing for the winter caretakers, and then stored there for the winter. And then in the spring, when we open up, it all gets moved right back down to the dining hall. So a lot of handling, a lot of physical, hands-on moving of food. Yep, that's life. Go to the next one. All right, this is when we start getting into some of the scenery pictures. This was a pod of orcas actually on the boat ride between our camp and the Haynes camp. So we see them rarely. Orcas are, they're a rarity to be sure. We do see a lot of humpbacks. So in the spring especially, there are whales spouting in the bay in front of camp all the time. Go to the next one. Seals. We got lots of seals. This was at the harbor in town. Go to the next one. Sea lions and seals. Lots of both. Go to the next one. That's the aurora, which I don't know if those screens. On this, there's a big black blob, so I'm not sure what's causing that. That's not the aurora. But yeah, we do get to see the northern lights, especially once we get into September, when we start getting darker days. So we're not all that far north. In the peak of the summer, we get about 18 hours of sunlight, and then the opposite in the winter. So we have about 6 hours of daylight in the winter time. And again, even with the daylight, we only get 18 hours that the sun is in the sky, but those remaining hours, it never really gets dark. You can easily walk through the woods without a flashlight and see just fine. So it gets dusk, but that's about it. And likewise in the winter, it's daylight, but it could be noon and you still need your headlights because it's just so gloomy and cloudy.
Well, that's because Juneau's in a rainforest, so 2 out of 3 days it rains. So a lot of times, or snows, if it's winter. But I think, was that 2020 that it rained? Mm-hmm. Anyways, 2020 it rained from April until September. Like, it was just cloudy or rainy.
Yeah, almost every day.
Yeah. And the sun came out, and I was like, oh, I have a new personality. Like, this is, and that's when I realized I should take vitamin D. But, yeah, we don't see the sun a whole lot up there. So.
Next picture. Yep. So that's a halibut. We like to fish whenever we can. That one was about 70 pounds. The biggest one I've ever landed was 108. So they do get big. That's not the normal. The normal is like 12 pounds. Between 12 and 20 is average. But yeah, we like halibut. Is there another one? Yep. So that's just the end. But we would love to field questions from you guys.
You spoke about the length of day or lack thereof. Do you run into many problems with the SAD, like the seasonal affected disorder with the and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's definitely more of a thing in the winter than the summer. And the summer, you just feel like you could go all day long. You know, it's kind of wild where, like, when camp's happening, you will look at the clock and it's like, oh, it's only 10 o'clock, right? It's like, oh, we got plenty of time. And then in the winter, it's like, well, it's 7 o'clock already, better go to bed. So you just feel it in your mood. And we get to see it a lot in the kids that come to our Bible study through the winter, of just watching their mood and energy, and even just the ones, like, their attendance, you know, like when you get down to, you know, close to peak winter solstice, like the number of kids definitely drops compared to September, who is still showing up when it was still summertime. It definitely takes your motivation down quite a bit.
Yeah, and I would say, like, even, like, community-wise, with, like, friends in our church and stuff, I think Juneau, and I'm probably most of Alaska, they're just very comfortable with just going home, you know, so it's very uncommon to, like, have people in your house or, like, have people over, which down here, that's just normal, you know, and so I think people just kind of settle in their seasonal depression, and they're like, this is my life. They just buckle up, and they're like, it's October, and here we go, and it's like, well, it doesn't have to be all that, you know, but, like, they've grown up that way, that's just how it is, so they just settle in that, you know,
Yep.
So just encouraging them to, hey, you should still come to Bible study, and, like, you know, that kind of thing, but I think they just kind of get comfortable.
Yep. And, like, Alaska's I think, #1 consumer of ice cream per capita. Yeah, and it's because it's comfort food, you know. Like, you want something that is good or tastes good and is bad for you. Yep.
When we visited Alaska, we took a bus from Anchorage up to Denali, and somebody suggested take a bus one way and take the train the other because you get to see different things. But we like to sit up front by the bus driver and stand the talker, so have this conversation. But the bus driver explained to us that there is that problem of depression in the winter, and there's lots of suicides, he said, and in the summer, people are sleep deprived. And they have that issue going on, too. So
Yeah.
I do recall that conversation.
It can be very easy to burn yourself out just because you can work, 18 hours a day, and you've got the daylight to do it. So that can definitely be something that you have to be aware of just because it's daylight doesn't mean I shouldn't, call it quits for the day and pick it up tomorrow.
Yes, Linda.
I just have a question about medical care and how far do you have to go and what does that look like when you do the campers? Are you required to have someone on site?
Yeah, we have a camp nurse on site whenever there are campers, and most of the injuries we see are just, scrapes and bumps and stuff like that. and actually the nurse's biggest responsibility, I would say, is just distributing medication. So yeah, our kids are definitely becoming more and more medicated as time goes on, and so distributing, knowing who gets what at the right time is probably their single biggest responsibility. They're all terrified to do it the first time because they're worried it's going to be, broken bones and burns and all that stuff, and it's like that. We see some of that, but it's like by and large, it's the small day-to-day. And yeah, we have to, so Juneau does have a hospital, so it's about 45 minutes from camp into the hospital if there is something major. In the event of a life-threatening emergency, we'd have to call the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard could have a helicopter there in about 15 minutes.
And they'd probably go to Seattle or Anchorage. So Juneau can't handle a lot of, like, I don't know.
It's just a trauma hospital.
Yeah, like they just
Yep.
fix you up as best they can, I guess. But, and then 7 of our staff went through a wilderness first responder program 2 years ago. So we went through that course. So we have that on staff as well. So just people to kind of patch you up if need be, if there's an emergency, and then figure out how to safely get them to where they need to be. But
You said this morning about drugs being a problem. Well, with Alaska, it's basically only the one land border with Canada. Is that how the drugs are coming in, or how are the drugs getting into Alaska?
Through the mail,
Yeah.
largely.
That makes it easy.
Just a few weeks ago, Juneau police intercepted, they were tipped off by the post office on a package that a lot of times they'll intercept it and then they'll do a stage delivery. But it was something like over $50,000 worth of methamphetamines. People just send it through the USPS.
Yep, and I feel like we see those stories often. So they're getting in frequently.
Yeah,
so,
they can't catch them all.
No.
Just wondering, in my own personal journey, when I got out of high school and was volunteering for youth ministry, I realized myself that I didn't know that this whole thing about a personal relationship with Jesus was something I truly understood. So I'm just wondering, as you get all these volunteers from across the country, I presume you probably have some similar stories like that, and just wondered if you comment on that.
Yeah, we said it this morning that I'm pretty sure we have, counselors that get saved at camp every year. A lot of them come from a Bible background, but then once they get there and get essentially, as we would say, in the trenches, doing ministry in the cabins, they kind of come to a realization of, I didn't know as much as I thought I did, and this is all a lot bigger than I initially thought. Realizing I did kind of just grow up with cultural faith, but I've never have made a personal decision. I've essentially just rode on the faith of others, and never made it my own.
I had a quick question. So summer is basically like 3 months long. So you have summer and winter, and that's basically it. But how warm does it get there generally in the summertime? Because I saw people in T-shirts and I was thinking, hey.
Yeah, mid-50s is T-shirt weather. But we will.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending where you're at. But we'll pretty frequently hit, I'd say we average around 60. We'll get some weather fronts coming through that we will hit into the 70s. And very rarely we'll cross 80. And 80 degrees in Alaska is hot.
Yeah, when the sun's out, I swear it's scientific, but I just don't know everything. But because of where we are in the angle of the sun, it hits us more directly. So the sun is hot. So last summer we got a lot of sun, and these kids do not know how to handle hot weather, and so you have to tell these kids to take off their hoodies. You know, they're like in their like rain boots and hoodies, and they're like, "I'm so hot," and you're like, "Yeah, take off your hoodie," you know, but they just don't know. So yeah, it is interesting. And even like the counselors that came that are from Juneau, like one of them got heat stroke or whatever, and it's like, Paul, drink water.
Drink
like,
your
come
water.
on. Like, you know, but it's like they just don't know. They're not used to it. So it does get hot sometimes. But
And it's interesting that, you know, if we have, because normally, you know, we average 2 out of 3 days rain, so sunny days are pristine, right? Like that is, everybody's flying high when it's sunny. But if we get more than 3 days of sun at a stretch, people are like, it needs to rain, you know, they get kind of uncomfortable with no rain for that long of a time, where it's like, you know, it's nice, but we run into it, especially in the winter. You have this almost this feeling of obligation of, if it's sunny, we have to be outside doing something. Like, you have to take advantage of it and make the most of it, and you can't just, like, you know, stay home and relax, even though that may be the thing that you need, you know, through the summer is, you know, I just need some downtime to recover, but you feel guilty wasting, you know, a nice sunny day. Yeah, definitely something I never encountered before we moved up to Alaska.
I will say too, my first summer, so I'm from Missouri, so it gets hot over there, but my first summer, I never wore shorts. Like, I think I was in long pants and hoodies. I didn't think it was hot, okay? But like, everyone talks about how 2019 was the hottest summer, and I was like, you guys are crazy. Like, this is not hot. But as I've been up there longer, I think it's hot too, you know? But so like, but if you're used to 90 degrees down here, it's not that hot, you know?
So the flip question then is, in the wintertime, how cold does it get, and about how much snow do you normally have?
We are blessed to be by the ocean, and it keeps us very moderate. So, like, our average wintertime temperature is 32, so we usually hover right around freezing. And our normal cycle is, you know, snow and then rain, it all melts, and then rinse and repeat. So we don't get a lot of accumulation. Typically we'll have no more than, you know, probably 2 feet is like at the max before it rains and melts. But out at camp, you know, being just a little bit farther north and a little colder, they camp typically they have more accumulation. So a lot of times when we show up in the spring, there are still places that have snow berms a couple feet deep. And last year we had some that lasted into the 3rd week of May before they finally met, because they were in a shady spot. They didn't get a lot of direct sunlight, and it just never really got all that warm for them to melt. So they just hung out for a while. But yeah, so like, it's not atypical for us to get 8 to 10 inches, and then it rains, melts, and so yeah, not a whole lot of accumulation. And we don't really do snow days. All the school buses have chains, and it takes a big snow dump for them to even delay school. So most of the time, the state's really good about, you know, getting on the roads as soon as it starts snowing, getting the plows going, and so yeah. 4-wheel drive is almost a must. 4-wheel or all-wheel. You see a lot of Subarus. And Alaska as a state also doesn't have inspections on their vehicles. So as long as it drives, you're good. So we have a lot of 90s Subarus.
Anyone else?
All right, thank you guys. Yeah, we love getting to share about camp and just life in Alaska, so thanks for having us.
You're very welcome. Just again, reminder that they have a table down in the foyer. If you want more information, make sure and encourage them along the way. And when are you heading back to Alaska? I mean, you're here in the lower for a while, or?
No, just till Thursday.
Oh, heading back.
Yep. So I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but like our camp move out date is, I think we're shooting right now for April 17th. So we'll get back and we'll have just about 2.5 weeks to kind of wrap up stuff in town before we're out at camp on site. So like the Bible study and Friday night hangouts we do, we'll usually kind of do an end of season party and just try and wrap up and bring some finality to that, as well as fitting in all those dinner meals we've been meaning to do, and the winter just got away from us. So seeing kind of all of our people in town before we're out for 6 months. And you reminded me, we do have a sign-up sheet down on the table if you would like to get our newsletter. It's usually monthly. In the summer, sometimes it's bi-monthly, just depending on how busy we get. But there's a piece of paper, you can just put your name and email address, and we can get you to that mailing list. And take a prayer card. So.
Thank you, guys.
Let's take up here this mic spot. All right. Great to hear from you. Wow, exciting stuff. How'd you like to live in Alaska? Any takers? Yeah. Ice cream. You had him at ice cream. Yeah.
Hey, it's not in the 90s, that's
There you go. Well, let me pray, and then you can dream of whatever the Lord is leading you to. Father, thank you so much again for what you're doing around the world. So many people need Jesus, and we're so grateful that folks like Andrew and Hannah have answered that call to take Jesus to the ends of the earth. And I pray that you would remind us to keep praying for them, to hold the ropes for them. And Lord, may we also be asking all the time, Lord, what is it you'd have me to do? And may we be obedient to whatever that is. To God be the glory. Thank you, Lord, for what you're doing to do. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay.